Okay, here we go. See if you remember how to do all these things. No, you don't. What's anything to the zero power? Does anybody remember? One. And remember that the presence or absence of parentheses is very important when you're dealing with the negatives also, because it tells you if -5 is being raised to the zero power or if just 5 is being raised. And in this case, it's just 5 because there is no set of parentheses. So -5 to the zero power is equal to -1. The second thing we have, what do we need to do before we worry about the exponent? You need to do what's in parentheses, and what you get is -4. Does anybody remember what a 1/2 power is the same thing as? The square root. 1/2 power is the same thing as the square root of something. Okay? If you're cubing a fraction and the whole fraction's in parentheses, but the minus sign's not, cube the top and the bottom. What's 1 cubed over 4 cubed? Okay, it's not 3, it's 1. It's 1 times 1 times 1 over 4 times 4 times 4. And then in this last term, I have a negative exponent. What does a negative exponent mean? Invert. Invert whatever is being raised to that power. So this actually becomes 5/2 raised to the second power. Okay, now let's take each thing here and keep going. Okay, -1 is -1 plus. Can you take the square root of a negative? If you make it imaginary. This is 2i. Okay, 1/64 is 1/64. And what's 5/2 squared? 25 over 4. All right, then to finish this off, we need to add together the terms that are alike. And 2i is different from everything else. So 2i can't be added. But -1, -1/64, and +25/4 can all be added together if I find a what? Common denominator, which in this case would be 64. Okay, now here are the numerators that I was dealing with. So the question is, how do we change those numerators? Well, this was 1 goes into 64 how many times? So I've got to multiply this by 64. Here, 64 goes into 64 once. And here, 4 goes into 64 16 times. No, nothing goes into, wait, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No. And you can just leave it improper. I'm going to go specifically over every little thing that we just did, okay? But I'm letting you see all the different types of work that we can do with fractions. Okay, so let's start here. 0 exponents. The rule is anything raised to the 0 power is equal to 1. If I asked you to simplify that expression, what would it be? Negative 1. Why is it negative 1?
Zero power.
Because the negative is outside the parentheses, which means that whatever you get, you want the negative of that answer. And since this whole thing is raised to the 0 power, it is 1. 0 exponents. Anything raised to the 0 power is 1. And then be careful of your parentheses and your negatives. Negative exponents. Remember that the negative on an exponent is simply a piece of instruction telling you to flip or to invert. You can have something like this. Where the entire thing is raised to a negative exponent, which means that everything is flipped. Okay, this becomes y to the 5th over 2x to the 4th squared. Or you could have this, where there are individual things in there that are being raised to a negative power, which means what flips?
Z.
Only those things. So the z and the y need to trade places. So the answer here would be 2x to the 4th, y to the 5th over z squared. Then it's 1 over 5 squared, or 1 over 25. Okay? So 0 exponents, negative exponents, fractional exponents. Wow. Fast. Remember, fractional exponents are the same as radicals. We have x to the 2/3 power. That's actually a root. Which one tells you the root, whether it's a square root or a cubed root? The denominator. The denominator is what moves out here. So this is the cubed root of x squared. You need to be able to go from one direction to the other. Okay? X to the 2/3 is the same thing as the cubed root of x squared. Cubed root of x squared is the same as x to the 2/3. Take this and turn it into a fractional exponent. X to the 2/5. Because this is the denominator of the fraction. Okay? And we'll see why we need to use those in just a few minutes. 0 exponents, negative exponents, fractional exponents. Now let's review what we do with the exponents when we're trying to put stuff together. If you are adding and subtracting variables, you only can combine like terms and you do not change the exponents. What makes something alike is the variable and the power it's raised to. And then we need to remember that's just an ID tag telling us that these are groups that are involved. And what we add is simply the coefficient. In this example, you have 2x cubed minus 4x squared plus 5x cubed minus 6x squared. What's the answer?